Hopefully you can all hear me just fine. Really nice to see you. Hopefully this will be an interesting session for you. We're going to have a look at setting up a blended learning school from scratch, which is something I had a chance to do this year. I'm going to go through what we did rather than anything I necessarily recommend for everybody else, but hopefully that will be useful. So let me just get this working, see if we can get this going. Okay, so you should be able to see this working really nicely. So let's get going. Excellent. So my name's Dan Layton. I'm a school leader, head teacher, deputy head teacher. I've been, strangely enough, the school I was working with to set this up for various reasons I've moved on from, but they're still going strong, doing really, really well. Let's go and have a quick think about this. This is the kind of key question which I want everybody to think about. If you could set up a school from scratch, what would you do? And this was my sort of big question that I confronted myself with when asked to do this. We're setting something up brand new, new site, new everything, new staff, the whole lot. What could we do? And the next question, I suppose, that follows on for that, which is this kind of, so what? Well, is there any reason why we couldn't achieve the same thing in any school? You know, I've spent most of my career using Google. I came into teaching in 2004, started using Google Apps in 2007, and I've done a lot of this stuff in other schools. But actually, this was the first time I got to do it from scratch. But these things do work in other schools. It's just a matter of how we think about it and how much pain there is to get over the kind of hump to do something really cool. So I'm going to cover these three things, not all of them equally. We're going to try and get onto what we did so far in some detail, because I know from some of the questions people are really interested in that. So the bottom line we're going to look at, this is really safeguarding first, money and resources, and where do they come from, what are we going to use them for. The second thing is the evidence for edtech. There's a lot of sort of asked questions about this. I was at an edtech conference in the UK recently with government people there saying, well, we need to look at the evidence. Well, I think we already have the answers to what's effective with edtech. And we'll cover a little bit of that. And that's been around for some time. It may not be necessarily the answer that you think. And finally, what did we do so far? So let's have a little look at this. Let's look at the bottom lines here. I want to just talk firstly about the security stack. I had a really interesting presentation from one of the security guys, head security guys at Google the other day. And one of the things he pointed out is that Google start from the physical security side. They actually own the chips. They produce the hardware that they run their systems on, right down to sort of the chip level. That I didn't know and is really interesting. So we've got the physical security of the building, the data centers, the networks, the routing architecture, the hardware that sits on top of it, the operating system that sits on top of that, and either your own operating system like Chrome or Android, or a hardened operating system like you've taken a version of Linux and you've hardened it for your own specifications. And of course, then the apps and the authentication on top of that. And then on top of that layer, you've then got your own internet and security as an educational organization. I'm going to say school from now on because it's quicker. And then, of course, you've got your student training, you've got people here, and you've got your staff training. So that, for me, is the whole security stack. And it's really important to get that right in schools. The bits that we can actually control as a school, I would say, really, that's the bits, staff training, student training, which we have the most control over and the most expertise in, knowing how to convince people to be able to operate safely. Then you've got your internet security. Now, this could be an IT supplier, it could be your own internal IT, but you're not an ISP, so you're never going to provide your own internets, but you may well want to build your own boxes. But I would say that's probably something for your IT supplier. Then all of the rest of that, if you're using Google, all of the rest of that security stack is handled by Google, right the way from apps and authentication all the way down to the physical security, which they also own and have control over. And that, to me, is something really important as a school, knowing that there's experts, thousands of them, at somewhere like Google, whose only job is to make sure that things are secure. And they're going to be better at it than us as a school. I mean, seriously, you know, this costs a lot of money. And my question is really, why would we want to spend all that kind of money trying to replicate something which other experts can cover. When we, let me tell you a little story. So when Google launched on the very first day in Europe, we actually signed up that day. Well, what had happened is a colleague of mine, a very, very good school leader called Peter Marshall, he just said to me, look, we've got to buy a new Exchange server. And it's going to cost us £72,000 at the time. This is a while back. It's obviously it's less now. And I said, well, seriously, can't we just use Gmail? Because we all use it anyway. We just forward our stuff to it. And I rang up a friend of mine who's an engineer at Google, who's a great guy, and said, can we just use Gmail with our badge on? And he went, well, there's this thing called Google Apps for Education that's just launched today. And we literally signed up there and then that morning and had the whole thing turned on by about 9:30 in the morning. I rang him at far too early in the morning for his sanity. And we had the whole school turned over in 3 or 4 days and went from 72,000 to free. And with none of the headaches of having to manage the thing. And that made a huge, huge difference to us as a school. And as a consequence, we then were in the position where we're only paying for our internet connection, our security, and our staff and our training. It made a big difference to us. It meant we can invest our dollars in the correct place. One other thing I just want to cover, that little slice there, apps and authentication. This is kind of one of the hidden benefits of Google, which a lot of people don't spot. You've all seen this page repeatedly. It's this big red Google button here in the middle. That, for me as a school leader, gives me a huge amount of confidence because I know that I have control of the Google Apps account, the G Suite account that the kids are using. If they have a problem, I can always get in and I can deal with the trolling or the flaming or whatever it is. I've got control of that. But because it's so easy to sign in, the kids preferentially are signing in with their Google accounts that they've got from school rather than their home account, which was what was previously happening. And that authentication layer, the fact that it's all HTTPS, the fact that it's all dealt with properly and securely, and I've got a management and a fallback layer, is actually a really important thing. It's one of the big reasons which I think Going Google gives you, is that big red Google button to sign in is all over the place. Lots more places than I've seen pretty well anything else except Facebook or Twitter. We don't really want Facebook or Twitter being used as logons by students. So just in terms of the security and the cost of the security, let's just remind ourselves, actually there's some big benefits there. And that's one of the key things that we did when we were looking at choosing what platform we were going to run this new school on. Just, it's a cost benefit and a security benefit analysis. So that's the first quick thought. Here's the second thought, and again, a fairly quick one. I think we already have a lot of the answers about whether edtech is effective. And the thing is, I think people are perhaps looking in the wrong place. They're talking about the evidence for edtech. Now, I know John Hattie was talking yesterday, and I've sometimes misused some of his research. So I'm really sorry. So I reread a whole bunch of it yesterday to make sure I wasn't talking out-of-date nonsense. And I came across this rather good illustration that he's put. And by the way, you can get the book. This is a free chapter, a couple of free chapters out of his book. And I love this. When teachers see learning through the eyes of the student, and when students see themselves as their own teachers, that's when we have the most effective teaching. And I think that's really critical. And one of the reasons that I use Google is because it allows me to do this. It allows me to give formative feedback completely clearly. I can see what's going on. Another little story. Yesterday, I had the joy of being Santa for my nephew's school. And I spent the whole time dressed up in this costume, kind of with dozens of primary school age children coming in. I mean, there was 2 hours of continual queue. And I'm using all my teacher skills because I'm going, okay, what do they want? Are they here? Do they just want a present? Do they want a kind of experience? They want to feel part of the magic of Christmas. Are they going to cry because there's a big scary man in a big red suit with a massive fake beard on? And actually, I spent my whole time guessing, and it worked quite well, with one exception for a boy who wanted to come in a second time and we didn't have enough presents. But I found myself trying to guess what was inside that little black box with the primary school children's heads. And I couldn't see it. And I'm so used now when I'm using Google tools to be able to see inside the learning process, because you can watch what the kid is typing. You can go to file revision history in Google Docs and see what they've done. You can see the process, and you can input using comments down the side of your document into the formative process early and effectively, and it's all visible. You've essentially, what you've got is you've got removal of barriers in the learning process. And that's one of the key things for me that the Google Suite does, is it gives teachers a clear insight into that sort of black box inside the kid's head. It's not perfect. There are some other great things. So if you've ever used Moodle quizzes really seriously, they're unbelievably good data you can get out of those, but it's hard. Google's kind of a lot easier to see what's inside that black box early on, just because of the live nature of it. You're not waiting for kids to hand stuff in. You can just look at it. So that, for me, given that the evidence stack by both Hattie and, for instance, the Sutton Trust in the UK says that formative feedback, self-regulation of learning, students understanding their own learning, these are the really, really effective things that have a big effect size. If you choose edtech, which meets those critical pedagogical requirements, then you've got edtech that's going to do its job. And that, for me, is the critical thing. I just spend my whole time using comments and formative feedback. I don't tend to use many fancy stuff a lot of the time. This is the thing that works really, really well. So, by the way, if you want to take a screenshot of that, use your phone, grab it. You can get that book. I put a little Google link there for you on visible learning. New updated version. I loved it. I really enjoyed reading it. I haven't read the latest version. So there it is. You can have a go at that. So let's have a quick go through what we did, and then I want to just take no more than about 5 minutes or so for this. So it's going to be a bit of a fly through and give you time to answer a few questions. Okay. Thanks, Abdullah. Sorry, the writing on the presentation is not clear. You should be able to get the session link, by the way, and you can have a look. The slides are all available. So let's just very quickly think about what blended learning is. Blended learning, as there are several definitions, but for me, one of the key things is this idea that you've got a combination of teacher-led whole class instruction, which is up here. Whoa, this one. Then you've got your online differentiated learning, so using things like, for instance, Newton, or you could use Khan Academy or any of the thousands of tools that are out there. You've got your small group teaching, and then, of course, you've got your targeted interventions. So one of the things that we found in the school that we set up was I needed to analyze what's all the data. And sorry, this is really a bit text heavy. There's a whole bunch of data. This is the essentials of the day-to-day teaching. You've got your evidence gathering. Where am I going to get all the stuff that they're learning? So that you're going to gather this in using Google Classroom, if you're using Google, for instance, or you could just be using your phone and sending it up to there, putting it into Drive. You've got your collaboration is critical on a day-to-day basis between staff, students, parents. You've got your workflow, your work distribution, your basic grade book. There still isn't a full grade book. I'm currently working on that. If anybody wants to join me, I've got to put a Kickstarter out for that, I think. And then, of course, you've got your course materials. Now, there's lots of different ways of doing this. You could have an LMS. You could just use Google Sites. Loads of different ways of doing it. But fundamentally, you're talking about you need some course materials which are organized. And then behind the scenes, you've got your data requirements. How are we going to analyze what's going on? Because if the kids are doing individualized instruction, if they're in small groups, we haven't got that whole teacher overview the whole time. So we've got to get this right. So you've got to get, for instance, your analytics right, your learner progress, your teacher performance. And of course, you're also going to want to analyze your financing and marketing. And of course, you need your standard MIS, SIS stuff, your timetabling, your admin, your finance, your recruiting, your attendance figures. And of course, you need finally the assessment and reporting loop. Both your summative marking and reporting, which a lot of people think about, and then formative. And that's the bit which I think is, which the G Suite is so good at, is impacting on the formative marking process. And finally, you've got your sort of management of behavior, etc. By the way, I love this little cartoon on the right there. So it's all true, huh? So this is what we did at the school. And this is all the things we did in the cloud at the school. We did the collaboration, the file, the print system, which of course is, we use Google Apps, sorry, G Suite now. I need to correct this slide. We set up the single sign-on, of course, just use Google Apps for it. We did the marketing website, the customer relationship management, because this happened to be an international school, so we were bringing in new parents, but equally in a state school, you can manage your parent interactions with it. A finance system, we installed a learning management system, we installed an MIS system. We also installed a thing called a learning record tracker, which basically looks at the MIS and pulls together the data about, Johnny finished this course, and it just pulls all that data together. That's kind of incipient. There's a new area of analytics. We also installed a cloud-based phone system, a cloud-based door security management, and a Wi-Fi management system, and of course, a cloud-based internet security system. Shoved Google Drive out to everything, and we got Chromebooks. So I know Chromebooks aren't actual in the cloud, but they're cloud devices. You get the idea. And then finally, the non-technical stuff, where we actually got the school ready, and we did all of our work on training and doing our lessons in the cloud. But that's kind of the non-technical side of it. So we literally did everything in the cloud, apart from the internet connection, which we needed. Putting the actual Wi-Fi boxes in, and we had to have some door locks, some actual physical door locks, and we had to have some cameras. But all the rest of it was cloud-based, which was kind of exciting. It was really, really useful to realize that actually we could do everything. The phone system, the phone-based PBX was kind of cool. It meant we could just use our iPhone or our Android phone, whichever we happen to have, and that was our phone, and we just got pinged by the PBX as necessary. And obviously we needed to recruit staff and pass some inspections. That's also what we did outside the cloud. But you'll notice there's a big difference between those two lists. This is all cloud-based. Well, this is just the physical stuff. Just a quick look at cost then. We wanted to talk about the bottom line. A lot of this very inexpensive. Obviously Google Apps is free. The cost there is a monthly cost, and this is just hosting, basically. We use Google Cloud Console, and you'll see at the bottom that I use the Bitnami Cloud Launcher, which you just go to bitnami.com and you choose Google Cloud Console as your installation platform, and literally in 2 minutes you can have any of these up and running. So you can have your WordPress up and running, you can have your you could have an edX system up and running, you could have Moodle, you could have Canvas. I put Google Course Builder in brackets because there isn't a kind of package on Bitnami for that. One of the good questions which one of the colleagues out there asked me is, why not use Google Course Builder? I like Google Course Builder, but it kind of needs a bit more coding than you do with, say, Moodle or Canvas, and that's one of the reasons that we chose Moodle in this case. But so I always feel ambivalent. I love Moodle, but I kind of hate it at the same time, and I think that's the case for a lot of people. I was also going to answer the question about why we used WordPress. Reason is because rather than Google Sites, when we set this up, Google Sites, the new Google Sites, which actually looks nice, wasn't available. It's only really been launched recently in the UK. I don't think at the time we could put our own domain on it. And WordPress has got a lot of really good stuff for doing your marketing behind it. It's very, very mature, works really well. That's why we used it. Because it fits the model. It's open source, it's free, so that worked well for us as a platform. The other elements in here, Zoho, we're a big fan of. I just noticed they are one of the approved sort of super partners from the blog on Google just a day or so ago. Zoho Customer Relationship Management works great. Zoho Books, which is the accounting system, incredibly powerful. If you're not a finance expert, like an accountant, it's a lot easier to understand than Sage or something like that. I love Sage, brilliant, but I'm not an accountant, and Zoho Books works easier for me. Open EMIS, if you've not come across it, it's mature now. It's a great looking system. We did install School Tool, but we are going to be installing Open EMIS as an experiment, though you can get it hosted for free. I think that's going to make some big waves in the coming few years. Ring Central was the phone system I told you about, and we use Ubiquiti in the end. We were going to use Xeris, but for various reasons ended up with Ubiquiti in the end. On the internet security side, securely, I think it's £6 a user. It might be slightly less than that. You'll have that's £6 a user per year. Actually, that should be. I should correct that. And that's a great system. Deals with all of your hosting, got a great dashboard behind it. Few little tweaks, there are things which it doesn't quite do, but we found that worked really well for us. And we got our Chromebooks in at £5 a user a month, roughly, from C Learning, who are a great Google partner. Total costs then, I mean, we had to spend about £6,000 to £10,000 putting a bunch of switches in to Wi-Fi the school. We already had the cabling in, fortunately. The door system was probably the most expensive thing, pound for pound. But actually, in terms of getting a whole, sort of pretty well, a whole school flooded with Wi-Fi, £6,000 to £10,000 is pretty good. The internet cost is not a huge amount. You know, these are not enormous sums as for a school. But the key thing is that we weren't spending out any more than a total. I think it was about, well, £35 to £50 a month we were spending on our total IT infrastructure behind the scenes. We could easily pay, let's say, £150 a month, maybe 200, and we would be able to cover a school up to 1,000 students because it's on that Google Cloud Console and just all runs. We don't have to worry about scaling, basically. The other big benefit then is that we're looking at a really quick install time, maybe 5 minutes for all those things on the Google Cloud Console. And then you've got your config. And most of these apps, because they're cloud-based, because they're mature, the interface is well set up, we're talking about maybe 30 minutes to maybe 5 hours to get all configured. I think the telephone exchange took us the longest because we were recording nice, you know, announcement messages and we kept getting them wrong. So that took a little while, but the actual setup was really quick. Just us getting it right was a little longer. But, you know, this is a lot less time than you would typically expect for doing a great big sort of custom install. So, takeaways we learned from this, and then I'm going to try and answer some questions for people. The bottom line is, if we're doing stuff in the cloud, if we're basing everything on the Google platform for a start, we're not spending money on stuff which other people are going to do better than us, and we can then use that money to train people instead. We can invest in our staff, we can invest in our students. We're not spending money replicating security systems or authentication systems or applications and all the other things which are out there and are either free or very low cost and really mature and good products. So where do we want to spend our money? That's one of the questions we ask ourselves. Well, we want to spend it on our staff. You know, we don't want to be spending it on stuff which other people are doing. The EdTech evidence, it's about choosing the tech that supports the pedagogical, educational evidence. We're talking about feedback, formative feedback, monitoring and student self-regulation, learning, insights, removing barriers, collaboration between staff and students, and breaking open that sort of black box. And that, for me, is something really critical. And then really, you know, a lot of this was pretty simple to set up. We have an IT guy, some great guys at a company called Magica. They set up a lot of the stuff, but they're off-site. The rest of it we could set up ourselves. It's not hard to work your way through this if you've got a little bit of time and patience or a little bit of expertise. You know, and this saves a huge amount of money in investing in sort of in having to get expensive people in to do it. This isn't easy. This isn't difficult. These are mature products which are easy to configure. So let me just try and see if I can answer a couple of questions for people. Omar, yes, it's going to be possible to access all the presentations and watch them later, I believe. Dandy used to ask, how can I use G Suite? Is Google Apps such as Google Docs, Slides, Forms belong to G Suite? Yeah, absolutely. G Suite is the new name for Google Apps. Okay, and oh, I can see somebody's answered that for you. Awesome, thank you, Karen. That's very kind of you to answer that. And now, Andrei, there we go. I can just about read my Russian here. I'm using two-factor authentication. I'm using UTF keys like you buy UTF. Not using those, but I'm using the phone two-factor authentication. It works great. I've been sort of experimenting with it. I was really surprised how easy it was to use the two-factor authentication. The security guy at Google said, seriously, do two-factor authentication. It's really important. I'll answer a few of these later on today, by the way, guys, in writing. Curriculum content, we used, so this is Gary Bryant. What do you use for curriculum content? We use both user-generated or teacher-generated content. We also use, what's the name of the science people? Pearson's science textbook, which is really great. I've completely forgotten the name of. It works really great, but also Khan Academy and Newton and all those kind of things. JC, do you say, how much cheaper do you think it was overall? I did a quick kind of calculation on this. I reckon it's about £5 per user per month, per student per month, and that cost to the student covers all the staff and everything. And then I compared that to maybe £8 or £9 or £10 per student per month in the normal school. So I was looking at kind of half price, and that, by the way, includes having a Chromebook for every student as well, and all the security and everything. So a huge saving on cost there was what we found worked well. Wendy, did he have any problems with Chromecast? I can see James Leonard. Thank you, James, for answering that. We found Chromecast work really, really well most of the time. If you really need some high quality, grab an HDMI cable, plug it in. Yeah, we found Chromecast was really, really useful. We used it every lesson. Yes, Karen, we did buy Chrome device management licenses for our Chromebooks. They are, I would say, essential. Ricardo answered that. We mainly did this in staff. How much time did it take, all the process, particularly the IT tasks? You know, a fair amount, but a lot less than getting somebody in from outside is the answer. I'll give you an answer to that later on. So, Arco, and editing incoming Microsoft Office files, you just upload them, convert them, they work great. We found that worked really, really well. Guys, I will put the link up there, and I will also answer any further questions later on today. I've got to go and do some singing with my choir and take my daughter to a concert, and I will give you some answers to these later on today. And it's been hopefully it's been helpful for you. Thanks very much to Google for inviting me to come and talk on here. It's been really, really great. Let's see if I can say hello to you before we go, so I can wave bye. Yeah, so I hope everybody has found today useful, and I will well, see you around. See you in the teacher sphere. Thanks very much, everybody.